Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and you guys see I'm back in the old space. I'll be doing most of my videos for the next couple months from here. So as you guys see in the title, I wanted to talk about being an expat. I've been back about a month now, back from the United States, and I wanted to give myself a little bit of time to kind of decompress from it because to be perfectly honest, it wasn't a great trip. It was not my best trip home, and it further solidified my commitment to this expat / nomadic lifestyle that I live. I'm going to get into a little bit more details, but the catalyst for doing this video was actually a Vice article that a couple of my friends were asked to participate in. So I've got a good friend named Leah Walker from Leah Travels. She actually lives in Paris now. She's also from Austin. I meet up with her quite often. And in this article, she said this, and I'm going to read it to you guys so I don't misquote her. She said, life in America is pretty damn good, but it doesn't fit me right now or maybe ever again. And for me, I think that's a really good way to sum it up. I think that living in the United States, and I've said this before, I think living in the United States is one of the easiest places on the planet to live. I mean, it is infinitely easier than a lot of places in the world, even first world countries. But for me, for my lifestyle, for what I enjoy doing, for my emotional stability, I can't live there anymore. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be an expat, and it's highly likely I'll probably be an expat for the rest of my life. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to break down a few of the reasons that a lot of people should, at least for a little while, try to be an expat, and the reasons that I feel are so important for me to be an expat myself. So a quick look at what an expat actually is. An expat is short for expatriate. Now there's been a lot of debate on debate within the expat community, like are some expats actually immigrants or are they refugees? Like what label do you use? For me personally, an expatriate is somebody who does not live in their home country and lives in another country legally becomes not necessarily a citizen, but has a legal visa, has resident status, stuff like that. That's what an expatriate is. And so the first thing that I wanted to talk about is that when you become an expat, you can be whoever you want to be. And that's one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion, for you to become an expat, because a lot of times people don't truly know who they are. So often we're programmed, and I think we're all programmed. We're all programmed by our family and our friends initially, then we're programmed by the education system that we come up in, and then we're programmed by other factors like relationships, religious organizations, etc. These are all forms of programming and indoctrination. It's interesting to me how many people back home in the US, they look to places like the Middle East, like Islam, and talk about the indoctrination and the brainwashing of these people when they don't even realize it's the same thing that happens to us. Like, I joined the military because I was programmed to be a soldier. Americans are programmed to be soldiers since we're little kids. We're programmed to be G.I. Joe and America versus everybody. That is brainwashing. That is programming. And it's so interesting that so many people don't see that. Once you leave that environment, once you leave those bubbles that we're brought up in those communities that force our narrative, you have opportunity to create your own story. You have opportunity to create your own narrative. Who do you want to be? What do you enjoy? What are your political views? What are your religious views? What spirituality do you want to follow? You have these opportunities as an expatriate because you start with a clean slate everywhere you go. Of course, you have people will have those preconceived notions. It's like being a middle-class white male in Thailand carries a certain amount of privilege from history. Being an African-American woman in Spain carries its own baggage because of history and privilege as well. So you got to understand that obviously it comes with those dynamics, but for the most part you can create your own story. So here's my take on it. For me personally, I think one of the biggest things that I was never taught was self-awareness, and I think this is a lot of people's issue. I don't even want to call it an issue. I think this is a lot of people's situation, is that we're not taught self-awareness, how to be self-aware about our emotions, about our education level, about what we say, about how we're being perceived, about our sexuality. We're not taught how to be self-aware and to be in touch with our feelings and our desires. And that's a big issue. I was in the military for 10 years, one way to other, 10 and a half years for the most part. And through that time, I literally went from my family growing up and religious growing up into the military until I was, what, 28-ish? So I was programmed for 28 years of my life, and I was given almost zero self-awareness outside of, you know, my physical capabilities. What travel's done, what being an expat has done, has given me that confidence to be confident in my own desires, my own beliefs, my own value systems, and develop me as a person. Being an expat pulls you out of that programming and almost forces you to develop a narrative of your own and to develop your own ideas and views on a lot of different aspects of life. So the next thing I want to touch on is being an expat helps you find where you belong. Now, when I say being an expat, I don't mean just going to live in London for 25, 30 years. I mean being an expat in different places, moving around a little bit, spending a year in Colombia, then spending a year in Chile, and then spending a year in Germany, and then spending a year in Cambodia. It gives you that opportunity to kind of find out where you belong. Because I feel like just because you're born in a place, that doesn't mean that you belong there. Because you had no choice. Like being born in Afghanistan isn't really a choice of yours. You're just there and you do the best with what you can. But when you're an expat, depending on what field you're in and how you finance your life, you have unlimited places that you can go in the world. People often ask me why I don't go back to some places. For example, Portugal is a great example. I just talked about this on Instagram. I went to Portugal. I stayed 2 weeks. I just didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And then they asked me, would I ever go back? And I was like, well, not in the foreseeable future, I won't, but maybe someday, who knows? You have that freedom, that opportunity. But when it comes to a place like Romania, when it comes to a place like Germany, when it comes to a place like Thailand, I'll go all day, every day. If I get an opportunity to live elsewhere, I'm living in Thailand right now, but if I get an opportunity to live in Berlin, I'm gonna take that opportunity. If I get an opportunity to live in Medellin, I probably will take that opportunity as well. So it gives you that freedom to kind of find out where you belong and what speaks to you. If you're not an urban jungle kind of person, which I am, you might not feel comfortable living in New York City, even though you were born in New York City. Now, you might be a country person. You might love Chiang Mai because it's, you know, that country wilderness kind of feel. So being an expat gives you an opportunity to kind of find out where you really belong. So here's my take on this one. So after I left the military, I was kind of lost. And that's how this lifestyle started, is that my entire life had been pre-programmed and my narrative had been set. And that's what the military does. You know, joining the military was the best decision of my life, and leaving the military was also the best decision of my life. I absolutely love my time there, but there's a bounce and ball system. You just follow along. And when I left that, I had no idea who I was. If I wasn't a soldier, who was I? You know, when you're when you do a certain job for so long, your entire adult life at that point, it becomes who you are. So when I left, I had no idea who I was. So I started to kind of explore more, and travel's always been a part of my identity, and the military did that. So I started to go to Hispaniola. I went to Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Absolutely fell in love with the island. Then I ended up going to South America, and so I did a lot of time in Argentina, Chile, Colombia. Then I started to dip my toe more into Europe. So I went to Germany, I went to Turkey, I went to Spain. And I started to discover this world of places where I felt comfortable, because I wasn't feeling comfortable in the US anymore, if that makes sense. I didn't feel connected to the US anymore. But as soon as I left, everything opened up. My view of the world on religion, on politics, on sexuality, on community, on family, all of those things blossomed and opened up. And I fell in love with places like Berlin, places like Romania, places like Istanbul, places like Bangkok, where I am right now. These places spoke to me, and they speak to who I want to be as a person. Okay, so the next thing is going to kind of be wrapped up a little bit. I can't really talk about this without giving my take on it as I speak, the first part. So this next point is about negativity back home. When I went back to the US, I felt it as soon as I got there. I flew into JFK. So I flew into JFK, but I flew into JFK at 10:30 p.m. and my flight was at 7 a.m. out of EWR, Newark, New Jersey. So I wasn't going to get a hotel room. It made no sense because I had to be at the airport at 4 a.m. anyway. So what I did was I decided to go get a slice at Two Brothers Pizza, which I absolutely love, not far from Times Square. So I took a train to Penn Station from JFK. And while I'm on the train, it instantly triggered. I saw the mental illness. I saw the poverty. I saw the frustration. On the train, I saw two women speaking to themselves between JFK to Penn Station, just yelling at themselves. Not each other, but themselves separately. And I was already on edge. And then I would see just the dilapidation of the New York City subway. Mind you, I just came from Copenhagen. Like, Copenhagen and New York City could not be further from the opposite ends of the spectrum, from a city, from a people standpoint, very different places. So I was already a little shell-shocked. And mind you, I hadn't been home in about 16 months at this point. So I'm seeing this all through fresh eyes, almost 2-year-old eyes. And I'm sitting on a train and I'm getting very uneasy, very uncomfortable. Not because I, was afraid or anything. It was because I just have basic situational awareness where I knew shit was just going to pop off. So I get to Penn Station finally, and Penn Station is just covered in homeless people. Like, it was so depressing, man. Like, it's really difficult for me to talk about it because I don't even know how to say it in a non-offensive way. Penn Station was just covered in homeless people, smelled like urine, trash everywhere. It was just like, and this is my fresh welcome back to America. Walking down the streets in New York City, in the middle of the night. Penn Station is on 35th Street, and I think Two Brothers is on 42nd or something like that. So I walked down, and between those 7 blocks, I just prostitutes, which I have no issue with. Go do you. Just people randomly pissing on buildings, and homeless people talking to themselves, and no police presence. Like, it was just depressing. And that was just in New York. That's the first couple hours I was back in New York. Then when I get back home to Texas, when I get to Austin and hanging out with my friends, all people do is complain now. Like, it is, and people say, oh, welcome to Trump's America. That is bullshit. It has always been this way. People complain without doing anything. Like, people just enjoy being miserable. Like, they do the same thing every single day. And I'm sorry if this comes off as America bashing. You guys know I love my country, but this is just the reality of it. Like, so many people are professional complainers back home now. And it just weighs on you when you're not there all the time. And maybe it's like when you're in that bubble or that system or that community that it becomes normal. But when you leave that, and this is to my point, when you leave that situation, you start to see that, hey, shit ain't that bad back home. Like, when you go to places like Bulgaria, like, you see, all right, I think we're doing okay in Austin, Texas. Like, it's interesting. So for me, being an expat gives you an opportunity to be removed from that negativity, and it is a spiritual drain. Like, it just drains you mentally and physically to be around that kind of negativity all the time, which is why a lot of the issues that are happening in the U.S. are happening. Mental illness is a big issue. Clearly, our political system is jacked up. Education is an absolute mess, and people can't talk to each other. People cannot talk to each other. I won't say people won't talk to each other. People just don't know how to talk to each other outside of this negative bubble. It's me versus you. That's how everything is framed in the US. Watching the news there, it's a 24-hour cycle of negativity. Constant negativity. Now granted, there's a lot of negative shit in the world to be upset about, but it's very clear that the powers that be want to keep people back home in the United States negative and at each other's throat. So here's my take on this safety thing, and I know I'm going to get a lot of backlash for saying that the United States isn't safe, but here's the reality. I'm black. I am a black man. Like, what happened, like the police officer getting off for killing Philando Castile was, for me and a lot of other black men, only validation of what we've been saying forever. Granted, there's a long list of police killing people of color to harken back to, and them not getting in trouble to prove this point, but it is extremely dangerous to be a person of color in the United States. It is easily the most dangerous country of the developed world to be black in. It is not even, nobody even comes close to us. Outside of that, the ridiculously blatant police killings and the devaluation of black lives by our government, you have, an hour before I started doing this video, it is July 6th. The morning, it's 6:30 a.m. July 6th right now, in Thailand time. A report just came out that said 100 people were shot in Chicago over the 4th of July weekend. I got so much shit for saying in a previous video, my grandmother was asking me to come home for 4th of July weekend because I was actually supposed to be still in the United States. I was literally afraid to go home because I knew this shit was going to happen. The thing about this, that a lot of my viewers, you guys might be European, you guys might be Asian, this might be a little foreign concept to you, so let me explain it. 4th of July weekend and Memorial Day weekend are probably two of the deadliest weekends in the United States for people of color. I cannot remember a 4th of July weekend or Memorial Day weekend, hell, even Labor Day weekend, growing up in Cleveland where somebody didn't get shot. Maybe I didn't see it, but somebody got shot. You know, 2 degrees of separation. Somebody's cousin, somebody's aunt, somebody's brother got it. Like, and please, people of color who grew up in the inner city or who still live in the inner city, comment below and tell people if I'm full of shit or tell people if I'm perfectly valid here. Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, New York, LA, Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Atlanta, Georgia, Miami, Florida, all of these places, I guarantee you, had deaths over 4th of July weekend. And that is the reality about growing up in the inner city in the United States. Being an expat, guys, 5 years. 5 years. I honestly cannot remember hearing about somebody being killed with a gun. Like really, I am seriously trying to remember. Like somebody even close to my circle of anything. And I have never heard about an expat being killed by a gun. Granted, I've heard expats getting stabbed. Oh yeah, I've heard that a lot. But an expat like being shot or a drive-by shooting, it doesn't happen. It's just not something that happens in Sweden. It's not something that happens in Germany or something that happens in Bangkok. Like, these aren't things that happen. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm sorry I'm ranting a little bit. Safety is probably one of the biggest things for me because I have been blessed to be able to stumble my way through 20 cities without anything happening. You know, I've been blessed to go to 93 countries around the world, and you know, I've only experienced violence in 3 of those places. Being an expatriate puts you at a far bigger advantage from a safety standpoint. So the next thing is, I think being an expat helps you solve problems that you might have back home. We don't do everything perfectly in whatever country you come from. The UK has its issues, as does the US, as does Canada, as Colombia. So me being an American, I grew up a certain way. I see things a certain way. We have a very individualistic culture. We have a certain view on education and on family and on community. Living somewhere else and seeing how they do it gives you an opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work in that society and let you adopt those things. For example, I think the education systems in Europe are superior to what we have in the United States. In Germany and Sweden, for example, their education systems are light years beyond what we have in the US. If we took those things and we adopted those to our American culture, I think we could improve our education by leaps and bounds, which would improve our economic position globally. It would improve our mental health situation. It would improve the bullying situation. It would improve the obesity situation. Granted, if you guys didn't notice, I think education is the foundational solution to pretty much all problems. But by being exposed to those things and then spending some time living in Germany, I have a different perspective on what quality education actually is. How I can see, now that I'm removed from it, how our education system has been commoditized, how ridiculously antiquated it is. It's a Great Depression model in a modern world. So I think there definitely needs to be an overhaul. But a lot of people can't see that because they've never lived outside of the United States. Hell, half Americans have never even left the United States, let alone, you know, actually lived outside of the United States. There's one thing to go to France and just visit for a week, but there's another thing to live in France, as Leo would tell you. There's another thing to actually live in Germany, live in Colombia, live in Argentina, and actually see how these systems work. There's something to be said about how politics are done in the UK versus how the electoral college foolishness is done in the United States. There are vast things that we can learn by being expats around the world, by spending time in places who have, in my opinion, superior legislation, superior cultural norms to us, and we can adopt those things. And I think only through exposure can people see that. When you have, our species is built on cooperation and sharing of ideas. Think about Spain and Cordoba. Like, a lot of the modern medical advancements came from the Moors in Cordoba, like spread throughout Europe from one culture to another. So I think we're at a point in our history where not only do we have the internet, but we have that freedom of mobility, especially people of color. We have that freedom of mobility where if you see problems back home, there's a planet full of places you can go. So I want to close this out because I know I'm going to get comments that I'm bashing America. Look, being an expat makes you a better citizen. It is not patriotic to blindly follow everything that your country does. It is patriotic to challenge it, to call us out, to try to make us better than we already are. That's what patriotism is, and that's what being an expat has taught me. It makes me a better citizen because I take off the red, white, and blue sunglasses and see our shortcomings, and I'll also see our immense potential for growth and how we can change the world. You know, I don't want to make this too political, but the 8 years of Obama showed what could happen and what could be, and the progressive steps that we can make on a global scale and the impact that our country has around the world. I like to say the United States has it's like being an American is like being surrounded by a two-way mirror. When you look out, all you see is how awesome you are. Everything is fucking awesome. When you're in the United States, everything about you is great. You're the best, you're number one, you're great at everything. And when you live outside of the United States, you can see through, you can see the bullshit. You can see all of it. You see the beauty and you see the ugliness at the same time. And then you're like, oh, that's what people were talking about. I never understood. Honestly, before I started to live and travel as much as I do outside of the United States, I could not understand how anybody on the planet Earth could hate the United States. I thought we were the greatest thing ever. But then I went to the Middle East. I went to Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. I went to Europe. I went to Germany. I went to Turkey. I went to Romania. I went to Asia. I went to South Korea, which is amazing, by the way. South Korea. I went to Thailand. I went to Cambodia. I went to South America, Costa Rica, Spain. I went all these different places, and I learned about their perspective of the United States. And I'm like, oh shit. And when you're not surrounded by a bunch of Americans validating your beliefs, you start to actually question it. You actually start to listen to what other people are saying. It's like, hey, Eric, why does the United States do this? And then you actually have to explain it. And for you to explain, you actually have to know what the fuck you're talking about. So you start to research and you start to look into things like the systemic marginalization of people of color, the school to prison pipeline, the fucking redlining, gerrymandering, the corruption in the political system. Like, it is, you start to look at these things like, wow, like this is real. So to wrap it up, I think overall, I'm not telling anybody to leave the United States. And a quick back to the beginning of this video, the Vice article's title that my friend Leah did was something like, why I quit on the United States. I would never quit on the United States. I'm a proud American. I served my country as a soldier. I would not give back a second of that time. I love Americans. I love who we are. I love our passion, our energy, our drive. I love our food. I love our history. I love our impact on global politics. I love our impact on popular culture. Like, I am a happy, content, proud American. But I also see the issues. I see the problems that we have, and I don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody has all the answers. I don't believe that being an expat is going to magically make you an expert on everything. But what I do believe is that being an expat gives you a different perspective, and it gives you the critical thinking ability to criticize us and to come up with ideas to try to fix things. All right, guys, that's it for me. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. Please comment below. Tell me what you think. You know, am I full of shit? Am I right on point? If you're an expat, please talk about your experience down below. That will be amazing for those people who watch this who are not expats, who don't understand what this lifestyle is like. Don't forget to subscribe and share. And once again, leave the world better than you found it. I'll see you guys in the next video.